All right, I believe we are live, welcoming in everyone from the web spaces. Hi everyone, I'm Darren Beckett, and my guest today again, because just these conversations are so juicy, Rachel Fox. How you doing, Rachel?
I am so well. I feel almost guilty for being so well today, given that a lot of the world is in flux. And so perhaps I'll enjoy my mood and share it. How about you?
Mm, I'm doing well too. I can feel, there's like that, as sensitive beings, and of course, given our profession of being more sensitive as life goes on, there's this deepening awareness of service for me lately. How can I
Mm.
serve? Just like you were saying, you're feeling good, and I'm feeling good too. And we could feel a little guilty about that, but then there's that other piece, which is how do we bring that energy into service to the projects that maybe give us joy, or to the community, to help those who are not doing so great. So that's how I'm doing. I'm feeling like I have a chance to help, and that's part of what having these conversations as well, because I feel that the conversations that we have, and others that are really wanting to use this time wisely, right? To find ways to quote unquote ride these big waves. What are some of what do you feel like the big wave is for you in your life right now?
So I love how you just brought that in because I have always believed that where you have abundance or security or stability present in your life, you're being equipped for something.
Yeah.
That this sort of gift doesn't come without then an impetus to act with it or to utilize it. And so I feel like, in this time of great change, like you're speaking of, clearly we're in a liminal space socially, politically, and economically, and, in terms of our health as a society and as a globe, the health of the globe, we're in this really in between space.
Mm.
And so I feel that as we have been given, the ability, whether it be through financial abundance or whether it be through creative abundance or wherever you're experiencing any sort of security in your life right now, it is something that you get to use, like you said, in service, because we can only give what we have. So,
Mm.
it is important, I think, for us to continue to um, recognize, acknowledge, and accept joy where it is, and do the same thing for the more like negative or chaotic or, the emotions that we don't necessarily move through with like total grace and ease, if you will, the ones that are challenging, that invite us to step up, or to step out and beyond a current paradigm. And I think that's where we're at. We are invited to step up and out at this moment.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of courage, and when I say courage, often in the kind of the basic paradigms, it's getting the willpower to go and do something, right? So we kind of assume that may be something outside of us. Go do something outside of yourself so that you can then come back to feeling better. And those things aren't present right now. It's very difficult for people to go outside themselves,
Mm,
it seems. You can't go, you could go like on a fast car drive, right? I want to go drive fast, right? The freeways are a little bit more empty, so to speak, but there's consequences. And so when we're doing things I'm a big believer that when we're doing things selfishly that they don't really have a lot of that progress juice behind them, right? Am I really progressing my life by going 130 miles an hour, on the 5 freeway? Is that really going to benefit my life and those around me? I mean, I'm sure people
mhm.
could create some form of dialogue where that is progress, but instead, if I have energy, how can I help someone? That may be someone close by, could be a family member, and just letting that be enough. I found myself in moments where I thinking like I've got to go do something like massive, right? But then I get blocked. Well, I don't have that kind of following. I don't have that kind of financial abundance to move those things in those directions. But when I come back to my center, come back to my spine and my neutrality and my breath, and man, it's been like time after time, like there is so much magic. I feel tired because there's so many things that I am doing and that I want to do, whether that, like being on a walk and seeing someone and just having a gentle conversation about life, or inspiring someone to be more creative through their things that are free, right? You're a poet. You just wrote a poetry book. It's a meditations on being. Super excited to read it, and but that's something that you did out of your creative. Like, it didn't did it what did it it didn't cost you anything to create poetry. You got nourished from it, right?
Yes, and it's definitely, I think, an outlet for me. So any
Yeah.
expression, right, that's making room for ourselves to not be taking in stimuli, not be um, consuming, but rather instead making space for something to come in and arise as inspiration, or to let
Mhm.
our own emotions, our sort of that subconscious awareness or the semi-conscious awareness rise up, right? Because that's where we find, I think, the deepest, most intrinsic, satisfying things. It's nice, for example, to move through an emotion, whether it is an emotion we associate with positive things, one that feels uplifting, or whether it's a negative emotion that we might associate with, lower feelings. It feels gratifying to have created something with that energy at the end that is of meaning,
Mm.
that at least helps you or helps others. Even if that is simply one other person, who you can empathize with because you've moved through something. So I feel like once we can harness that in a creative way that augments, not detracts from the spaces around us, that's healing. It makes things, we all, man searches for meaning, and we all want
Mhm.
things to mean something. So when we can find that meaning, I think we are inherently like buoyed by that. We're definitely lifted by that in general. Um, and what you were saying just a moment ago about the way to go about doing this service, I think is really like paramount to underscore. And that is that we can be activists, we can be of great service immediately around us, most easily,
Absolutely.
almost like dropping a pebble in a water in the concentric rings, right? Our influence is so great with those really close to us, like our neighbors, our family, the people who are in our local community. And I think sometimes we forget how much we can be of significance with small actions in those really direct pools, and how meaningful that is. Like we might not be able to reach out and bop Donald Trump on the head or anything, or tell people to play nice in the debate, but we can totally do that when it comes to our friends and family. We can begin to mediate conversations and improve communication. We have that power. And that, I think, is just a reframe of perspective from,
Yeah.
oh, this unfortunate thing is happening to me, to like, I get to figure out how to solve, and that's going to grow me.
That's empowering. That's what I'm always looking for. What's going to empower me to feel, and doing the creative thing, bringing in that relationship, that project, working into the context of self-discovery is really empowering, and it feels so good. Not like a feel good where I'm getting off on it. It's a feel
Right.
good that you're serving a greater purpose, and then you get to let go of that feeling of what happens next, right? We
Mhm.
have no idea what's going to happen. Even now there's still a lot of doubt, a lot of, we're in that void. And I think being able to harness our creative potential by, whether it's meditation or poetry or writing, or it could be storytelling, it could be anything that's timeless, right? It's
Mhm.
easy to get trapped into this moment, this time, and what's happening. I was even watching Michael Beckwith, who he said he often tells people to read the newspaper today, read the whole thing through, and then save it for 6 months later. And then in 6 months, you pick it up again. And you realize it's just the same story in a different form. There's always something trying to excite us
Mhm.
about our world. And that overstimulation is just tiring. So being able to come back into that slowing down position and just be, I think that's been a huge potential. And as you said, what happens when we empty the vessel? This energy can rush in, and all of a sudden we may find ourselves creating magic in our lives where we previously thought there was nothing. It was dull.
And I think you've just said a key word as well, which is vessel. One of the, I think, things that my Saturn return has brought to me is the recognition, especially as a Saturn in Cap, that I need to put into vessels with integrity, and that sometimes we don't want to admit which vessels are leaking, or we might be pouring
Mm,
ourselves out into something with a hole in the bottom. And it might even be self evident, but we have attachments, right? It's natural, it's human. We
sure.
love, and we relate to, and we want to remain close to. That's why pandemic is so hard for people. We're more detached from each other, so we don't get that sort of affirmative connection of life, right? But when we can make sure that what we're putting our powerful energy and attention into, that actually is something that can bear fruit, right? That seed is being planted in a powerful way. We can grow more. Everyone
Yeah.
involved can grow more. It's just, it's not wasting anyone's time, if you will, because when we think about time, it's lifetime. Like this
Mhm.
moment is part of our lifetime, and that is just, I think we need to sometimes think about how sacred it is and how we cannot take for granted this lifetime. Like you said, we have no we have the present moment, which is full of potential and it's quite spacious, but there aren't promises for the rest of it. And I've been trying to slip into kind of an appreciation of the open-ended nature of things,
Mm,
because it can be anxiety producing or exciting, and that's such a perspective thing, and
yeah.
it's almost so simple as an intention to take a perspective, like, let me be more open to potential positive change as opposed to worried, about future negative anxiety producing things. Like, I can look at the lack and the restriction because that's there in 2020.
Sure.
Or I can look at perhaps the empty space for something new to come in, and the patience.
Absolutely. I think, and as you're talking about it, it's reminding me, and also it's a question for both of us.
Hmm.
Most people who are getting into metaphysics, trying to understand their world through different paradigms and lenses, we can get stuck on words. Okay, let's choose different words. You just chose different words. But what I felt from you was a feeling when you said those words. So how do we recognize the difference
Mm,
between us just speaking words and trying to assume that change has happened? How do we know when that change has happened inside?
mm. How do we know?
Because I
There's a
feel like
quote.
there's go ahead.
There's a quote, and it's very short, that I used right when I opened the studio, and it was on my Instagram. And it was, "You will know the truth by the way it feels." So that's almost like taking your question and turning it in on itself as like an infinity sign.
Please, please, please.
But I feel as if um, certainty, or like a catalyst, like that conviction has an emotional nature to it. That certitude has some kind of a spiritual, or like there's something that is beyond logical, that gives you
Mm,
that level of certainty, and we don't often have it. I think that's fine, because often things aren't certain. So,
mhm.
like, if we were convicted fiercely about everything, you know there'd be a
We'd be
lot
conquistadors.
going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
It may not turn out so
exactly.
well.
But I think it's also trust too in the feelings that we're sensing. So how do we trust them, but to practice witnessing them so we can
Yes.
start to see patterns, and
Yes.
then know for certain when we're witnessing something, as opposed to only having a vague idea because we haven't observed our previous behavior, you know.
I mean, in a timeline, we can see things play out, and then there's cycles, right? And there's currents, right? Like when I go surfing, I'm looking at the currents. What is there a storm that's bringing the waves? Oh, it's like I'm all excited to go surfing, and there's no waves. Well, you didn't check, you didn't take that first check inside and say, well,
Mm-hmm.
what is the larger landscape? And being able to do that takes practice, I think, and it's inner mastery or inner skill, the gong fu of life, to be able to become more sensitive to our patterns, develop a healthy awareness of where we may be feeling fear, anger, doubt, and then how do we transform? How do we alchemize those things into what you're saying, which is like, how do we use that to reframe our life as champions rather than as victims to the paradigm that is happening? It's very easy to fall into these lower vibrational ways of living. I've been there. Sometimes I find myself going into them. But you're going to say something.
I think you're pointing out something that's really important again. Like you've made a few points that are super, I think, crucial in this time. And I feel this especially from the more new age or liberal or whoever wants to label themselves part of this sort of spiritual awakening at this moment, that there can be a tendency to look through very rose colored glasses, to
Yeah.
want to see all love and light. And I've realized recently, because I'm one of those people who has been in this place of like, no, I will only see love and be love, and that's it. That's all I'm doing right now. But that ends up being self denial.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't self deny the negative, or I'm not going to have good information about my internal state because I'm not going to be a witness who allows themselves to see what's going on. Because, negative emotions or, anxiety or grief, like these are very natural things and they occur in human beings. They occur in, you know, every one of us at some point. And to deny
Even
that they
animals, right?
exist means you can't work with them,
Yeah.
which,
It's a dead end. Hey, we call that, what is that? Veering off the path.
mhm.
Yeah, I often, especially earlier on in my life, when I was trying to be more intellectual about my how I viewed my life, there was this kind of like, what's the easiest path? What's the, I used to mow the lawn in these like weird haphazard ways because I felt like I was cheating doing the lawn, right? And then it turns out there's like only really a few ways to do it really well and really efficiently. But I'm trying to over intellectualize things, and I'm trying to make sense of how to do it, easier, faster, so I can go do on my day. And then, that kind of mentality though leaves out the beauty of creating the art of life. So maybe some things in life don't need such a big creative process. Some things we don't need to maybe go so deep into it to receive the gems of what's there, right? Meditation often, people are trying to work they're trying to make their mind calm, or they're trying to make their body calm down, and the making it happen really produces the resistance to the very thing that we're looking for. So we have to kind of reverse engineer the process. It's kind of like a process of subtraction. We have to kind of subtract these uh, belief systems to create something and recognize, I guess, who are we underneath all of the things that we do every day? Who are we underneath our patterns?
Yeah.
What patterns are there that are longer term? What can be helpful? I know I have patterns that probably aren't so great, but now that I'm aware of them, when I start to do it, it's easier for me to come out of it. I don't go so deep into my pattern or my shadow before I realize, oh, that's what's happening. I need to step back. I need to ground myself. I need to come back to neutral before I go back into that space, right?
And I think sometimes it can be interesting because we have a lot of these patterns as human beings that are day to day, that are mundane, that don't really detract from our quality of life. But like if we were being good, we wouldn't do whatever it is, the thing that we do that's our indulgence. But
True.
I've realized as well that sometimes it's okay to use something as a tool you will discard later. I'm not saying that, we need to ignore addictive behaviors where they're present or compulsions. Witnessing that is really important. Like that's part of the need for this sort of present moment engagement and the practice of, I think, like just present moment awareness meditation is one of the most fundamental tools, because when you're engaging with the present, you don't deny what's there. You might not like everything that's there, but that's okay. It's coming up for you, and you can't deny when you're being present. So I feel like the more that we're able to kind of get rid of that misconception that people don't have hard times, that you get to this level of
Mm,
spirituality or this level of being where like you're good, you'll be zen with what, because that's a utopia sort of, that's we
I get
scrape those moments, and then we
it's true.
it's,
It's true. You got to come down from the mountain. The most quote unquote enlightened people I've met have, been some of the most unpresent people in terms of you're not going to find a lot. And I think it's just like physics as well. You're not going to find, at least right now in humanity, enlightened people at such high positions of leadership. Maybe there's some astrology there as well to look at why that is, and how that may be evolving, how we may be. I personally think it has to do with child rearing. Now, I don't have children, but I talk with my inner child a lot, and I do work with a lot of children, and I see that when we're developing in our early stages, there is a densification that happens quite rapidly into what we're calling this mundane lifestyle, right? I even know there's babies that have like a plastic cell phone, or the vacuum, and it's like, we're getting it, and it could be fun, and the kids love it, and there's this sense of play and being a part of an
mm-hmm.
adult society. But the reality is we haven't created an adult society. If it existed, we wouldn't have the problems we have today. So
Yeah.
I feel that the generations to come, how we educate, not just in terms of math and science, but in terms of the stuff we're talking about, which is being able to feel our feelings. Can we allow children to feel their feelings without trying to stop them from feeling something that we may know hurts ourselves? You know, I
Mm-hmm.
may feel like I don't want to feel that feeling. So then why should they? That's not a good feeling. We want to put that aside. And as you and I both know, those things manifest over time. They manifest in, things like physical injuries or behaviors where we block ourselves from the success that we want. Quite often we're working in life to succeed or try and climb. It's a very Western thing, very Greco-Roman thing. Like, we want to have progress in life. You should conquer more land. You should have a bigger business. You should have a bigger family. You should have a bigger bank account. And of course, none of those things are wrong, except for conquest and killing people. But the idea of growing something bigger, but then it becomes, how do we manage that expansion?
I feel as if you're hitting upon just kind of a fundamental truth of human society for the last, I don't know, since historical record. And that's an imbalance of yang. And when I say yang,
Absolutely.
what I mean is that we
Absolutely.
have been trying to assert more than we receive, just generally as a species. And it's like, well, creative problem solving, that inspiration has to be received. Whenever you are going to, enjoy the fruit of the earth, that's something that you receive. And we just haven't been very good at receiving. I think, the Industrial Revolution and the technological revolution since then shows us how honed our skills of yang are. We are
Mm.
good at creating things, structures, at outwardly asserting our will. But I feel like we have denied a bit, um, really what humans were interested in before that Industrial Revolution, and that was God. Or what is this? Why are we here? What are we doing? If you look at most of the writings, especially like you said, those Greco-Roman, things from the first records in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and such things, it's all about spiritual, emotional, this very yin stuff. Why are we here? What do we need to do? Give us messages. Everything that is, there was this great acknowledgement of the power of something beyond us. And the impetus was like, let's figure out what to do about this, or like, let's get good with this, so that whenever we die, that we're good, and that goes well. But I feel like recently the question for us, or I also have it for you. Do you think that we've just been kind of trying to figure out how to be more comfortable, and like literally trying
Hmm.
to bash our way into a level of comfort, like asserting our will to be comfortable without a whole lot of else? You know, what else is being really wealthy than being
Absolutely.
really secure?
Yeah. I used to think as a kid, because I grew up during like the recycling. We both did. We both grew up during like the recycling revolution. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna, we're gonna go to electric cars and we're gonna recycle everything. And you know, if you leave the room, make sure you turn off the light because if you don't, you know, you're wasting electricity. And those principles I think are great, right? It's like, well, we're uncomfortable with the way that we're consuming, so let's try and make ourselves more comfortable about consuming. So if you can consume and you can recycle that consumption, then you can consume forever. And quickly, you know, we realized that recycling is not going to save us. Turning off the light, you know, may help, you know, lower your electricity bill by a few cents, but it's not going to help, you know, the fact that electricity is still being produced at archaic levels, I'll say. So I think yes, I agree. I do think that we're trying to bash. It remind. I mean, obviously, I love Asian studies, so you know, it reminds me of Confucius. You know, let's build a better society, a bigger society, and then let's figure out systems so we can manage that.
Mm-hmm.
So this part of the city is for blacksmith, and this part of the city is for scholars, and this part of the city is where the peasants live, and this is the city, the part of the city where the king lives. Now, of course, that whole paradigm is built on, you know, the patriarchy. So we're talking about leading other people as one individual, and often it was considered the mandate of heaven was the king. The leader was a mandate, and we still have this tendency. You know, even our presidents seem to have this kind of like I'm a
Yeah.
god quality, and I think that's part of the unhealthy part of our ego that is not being reminded of the human or the spiritual experience, which is it's not about how much I'm gaining outwardly, it's what are the experiences that are teaching me about how to live a better life, right? Like I grew up in a bubble. I mean, even though we traveled to play baseball in other cities, I rarely ventured outside of a 15-mile radius, probably even smaller than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that small radius, there was a kind of a bubble of comfort. So how could I possibly know myself if I haven't experienced the world, experienced other people, experienced their experiences? What's their story? Who do they say they are? Who do they say they come from? Where do they like to do their joy? You know what? And so you start to learn about culture. You start to learn about that there's more than just me, but that I'm important because how my story, how I tell people about my life, you know, it used to be when I was more depressed, I would tell people the worst things about my life. You know, like, well, this happened to me when I was young, so it makes me this person, or these traumas are who I am, and so just let me be in my trauma. And then there were people that came into my life and were just like, boom, 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 boom. No, 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 no. That's not your story. You're not these negative things in your life. You're not even the positive things in your life. You're just your life. So how would you like to convey yourself to the world? And then I started to like, I mean, it's taken years, and it will be a refining process for the rest of my life, as you know, because more experiences, more ability to absorb the world, and therefore an awareness of when I'm feeling comfortable and how to create an uncomfortableness for progress rather than an uncomfortableness as a way of being like, oh, I got to step away from the world, right? It's easier to be like, oh, there's something happening in my life that's going to change my story. So let me just deny that that's changing because then I don't have to change my story. I can continue being my trauma. Instead, it's just like we're creating uncomfortability for the sake of progress, right?
Well, and it's also, I think, the affirmation that comfort and discomfort exist, that they both have utility and purpose. I mean, it's the same reason any duality exists, that there's a defining, right? There's got to be polarity in the world, or we wouldn't have all this great, earth suspended,
Yeah.
turn, everything. This is all very physical as opposed to, metaphysical. And I feel as if, in general, we have to be able to, I think I'm going to go back to the we need to accept all of the feedback we're getting, that we're not
Mm.
just, when you ask questions, you're going to receive an answer. You got to receive again. And when we're interacting with our environment, we're receiving as well things from the environment. We are asserting ourselves with our environment as well. And that's where the alchemy is. That's
Yeah.
literally on an atomic level where things are reacting and they're in motion. And I feel like we have to accept that, and that we're going to be changed by things, and that things are going to be changed by us, because there's a level of personal responsibility when you get there. And
Yeah.
it's to become, I think a lot of people think about some of the things that we're talking about, and it sounds like a lot of work, and that's because it is. But I feel like when you go into the world, you realize that life, from the life of a child, you realize it will be work, and that's part of a little small heartbreak. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, when I fall, it hurts. Gravity's real. Like I'm going to have to figure out how to sustain my life. Someone figures out how to sustain my life as a child, provides for me, and I will have to provide for me. And at the core, I mean, the earth is providing for everyone. So we actually don't have to worry about that too much unless we go ahead and scorch the face that bears the fruit.
Yeah.
That's
It's
not going
true.
to.
It's true. And then there's the what's the space. So you're saying let's be open to that self reflection. But I'm often seeing, the space behind you. I'm assuming that's your room. You
Hmm.
keep your space clean, and that's energetically clean too, right? We keep our space. It's not just about organizing things. It's about, when people are reflecting, I would hate to see someone self-reflect in an area, in a space where they're not comfortable or where they're not safe. And I think that's one of the big changes I think that's going to happen on the planet is the safety of the home needs to become a lot safer. The construct and the container that people are receiving self information in. I
Hmm.
mean, if I didn't, and often I didn't feel as a child that I had that safe space too. So I just plugged it. I was just like, nobody wants to hear about my emotions. Everyone wants me to just, like, oh, that's complaining, or that we don't do that in this household. Then it becomes something that we kind of just like, oh, whenever I'm feeling a feeling, whether that be like a breakup in a relationship or not getting the grade I wanted, or not hitting, not striking out the guys in baseball, I come home really mad, and there wasn't a space for me to just be like, but it's okay. If you don't, like, if you don't become a baseball player, you're still going to live a great life. If you don't get, straight A's, there's so much potential for so many things. And then let's not limit the container. Let's expand the container, right? It's often like as children, we're taught like these are the three things that you can be. Here are your options, as if those options are the only thing. But that's like, for me, it was growing outside of my bubble of where I grew up and saying, I'm gonna go outside because I feel like I don't have enough information for me to make sense of my own life, right?
Hmm.
So then there becomes a kind of willpower to go and experience things that I may hate afterwards. I'd be like, that was an experience. I don't like that type of music. That's cool. I don't have to like it. I don't have to, but I can say I experienced it. I can
Yeah.
say that this is an experience that is added to the instrument that we're creating, right?
And I think at the core of what I'm hearing you say is that when we get outside of a comfort zone, we're going to experience emotions. Period. Some
Yeah.
emotions, they will be novel when we're getting into a space outside of comfort. So we'll have to deal with novel emotions. Emotional processing is something we have to take personal responsibility for when we're adults again. It's one of those, you're going to have to deal with this material, and your process is going to look unique because you're unique. You know what you've been through. Like you said, we have perhaps triggers, we have traumas, we have the full knowledge, though, of our own story because it's ours. So,
Mhm.
how do we provide an outlet, relief for those emotions that we have to process? And what does that self care look like? It for sure looks like a space you feel comfortable in, when we have the ability to cultivate that for itself or for ourselves, that's just self-care. That's like brushing your teeth. You have to take care of things, and it's not a have to, it's also a get to, because like you,
Mm,
this is a very big issue for a lot of people around the globe. There
I love
is
that.
a lot of lack that's legitimate. And so honoring our energy, honoring our privilege, honoring the things we have is also to take care of them. Us being, of course, like our own form, self being, is the greatest privilege that we've been granted, because we have the ability to, we're almost like our own paintbrush, and the world is like a
Mm.
canvas that's already been, a lot of work's been done, but we can go around and do other stuff. And
That's what I always like. I always say, like living as fine art. You're not, are you going to accumulate fine art in your house and be like, well, this is who I am? No, that's what they created. So then, like, what is it that you're creating that's an art? It could be like watching a child go down the street, walking home from school, and you'll see them dance on the
mm,
sidewalk, right? There's like you said, it's not I have to walk home, it's I get to walk home. And so I get to do that proudly. I'm going to ride my skateboard back and forth, or I'm going to ride my bike, or I'm going to take my time. There's like a get to do it, and that's part of the cleanliness of living. In tea ceremony, we often say 80% of life is cleaning. So you're like 80% of the tea ceremony is you have to clean the dishes, you have to clean the cups, you have to make sure that there's reverence for the people you're serving and the space around you. And so I really took that to heart in my life.
mm,
And of course, I'm not perfect with it, especially being a man. There seems to be a little bit more work, and I grew up in a household full of men.
yeah.
Even my mom was like, "Let's go play catch and play baseball." So there's often a little bit of like, yeah, I get dirty, or I get to, but then who am I living with? How am I respecting
Mm.
who I'm living with? Who am I respecting myself by keeping my life organized, by making sure that I spend time? I get to do that, right? As you're saying. And that's rewarding. That's encouraging.
And that's also very individual. So I think we also
Yes.
get to discover how we function optimally, because nobody else can tell us what that optimal function looks like. We have to be able to imagine the routines, the rituals, the environment. What is the version of me that's growing? Like you talked about, like this is an ever evolving version of me. So this version, what am I doing? What does that look like? And I think sometimes we have to give ourselves permission first to do that, because we
Mm,
spend a lot of time, I think, trying to embody social ideals, and it comes from a good place. We want to be of service. And if society says this is what an ideal person does, or perhaps we believe, if I'm more like this person or like this mold, or maybe if I get organized in this way, have this furniture, wear these clothes, that I'll be I'll be of service. I'll be useful for society. But I think, that also discounts the body needs what the body needs, same with the soul and the emotional processes and mental, etc. So when you're upkeeping you, when your emotional, mental, spiritual hygiene is great, that is a public service too.
absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, that's probably the easiest way to be of service. We're trying to do so much without taking care. Look, I see it, and I know that you see this as well, as like we're kind of like a light bulb growing. When people are more, when people are in moments or emotional spheres that don't feel so good, the body clings up. We get our heart space closes
Mhm.
off. We get, it's like looking at a cell phone for hours. Our back hunches, and our posture starts to just disintegrate. The body is aware, and it's going into the patterns that we energetically feed. When we do the opposite, right? Like a lot
Mhm.
of qigong, yoga, tai chi is all about like opening up. I call it opening up the pearl. It's like everything's opening up, and immediately, I know, right? It's just like ah, and it just opens. And that process, I feel myself creating a stable field, and then that field is something that other people can feel, other people can pull on and work with. And that's the kind of energy dynamics, right? How are we interacting? And that's I mean, these are exciting things. I could
Mm-hmm.
spend, I'm, in fact, I have, a lot of our work is like, this is a fun thing. I'm learning how to grow my ability to serve without there being so much, I call the roadblocks, right? We want to build a business that helps the world, but we've never done it before. So then there's roadblocks we have to work through. Maybe it's the roadblock of how do you run the business? Maybe it's the roadblock of, do I have the capacity to help that many people? All of a sudden, people are asking me for things that I've never been asked for before. How do I manage the amount of people wanting my help? Or
Mm-hmm.
vice versa. How do I manage that I need to delegate or that I need help just as much? So it's a never ending process, but every day waking up with this magical kind of feeling that there is potential and
Mm-hmm.
I'm directing the potential. And sometimes it goes down the tube and then it's just like, okay, great. Once again, what am I learning? How am I doing? How am I feeling? And what is going to bring, things back into balance? And a lot of times that may just be like, yeah, that's part of you that I didn't like, didn't, it wasn't, or, that feeling wasn't good, but that's okay, as you're saying, right? We want to be able to say that's okay. And what are you going to do with it?
I mean, what's the old adage? I didn't fail, I learned.
Yeah,
Like,
that's right. That's right.
I think that failure, or what we view as failure, like we have to understand the subjectivity of that, and that sometimes we end up defining ourselves. I mean, that's the composition of our identity. And so we can be much more gentle with ourselves, and I think sometimes we are, and also with others, not being unaccountable for actions, but the very contrast of that, being accountable and yet soft, which allows you to be firm in the witnessing, but not necessarily self flagellate because you're a human being and you did something.
Mm,
Instead, you can, I think, feel kind of circling back to the beginning of our conversation. If you can do something with that energy, if you
mm,
can make a positive change, or if maybe a place you failed is a place where later you end up, being much stronger and being able to succeed because you had the previous experience, it ends up being, I don't want to say, worth it, but once we get to see the whole arc of a story, something might make a lot more sense. It might have felt like a slight by life initially. I think a lot of us, we struggle. We all do.
mm.
But we have to acknowledge that some people struggle on levels others will never understand.
It's true.
And that's true of a lot of us. We have these individual struggles that people won't be able to empathize with necessarily because they haven't gone through it. It might seem meaningless, but we have the ability to give it meaning if we do something meaningful with it. And that's our free will.
And there's some poetry behind that.
This is how we write poems. We talk,
It's
then I write poems.
That's right. There'll be a whole book later. I mean, it's on a side note, I would love to, not that I want to go back in time and just be in that, but I imagine a place in time where people talk to more in poetry. I guess English language is difficult to do that in. I'm sure other languages are much easier to speak in this elegant way. That's another way to make life, more fun, more artistic. I like linguists, so there's always like and you even said a word earlier that I was like, oh, I don't know what that means. Let's figure that out. There's this experience of there's so much to be gained through the experience. And like you said, giving ourselves permission to feel, if that's a struggle, let yourself feel it. Know that, either you're safe by yourself in that moment, or that there's someone that can help you move that energy as well. And this is why we have each other. This is why we have communities that are growing at rapid rates of looking at wellness and well-being topics in new ways, and honoring this ancient history that we can pull from. We may not do surgery like they did 300 years ago. That probably wouldn't
Mhm.
be helpful. But the ancients understood, because as you said earlier, they spent their whole lives doing it. It wasn't like, oh, I went to school to learn the stars. It was like, no, your whole life was about the stars. Or oh, I went to school for agriculture. It was like, no, my whole life is about corn or growing, and just maintaining that space. And so we get to do all these things now, and so there can also be kind of like a confusion. There's so much to do, I could be so many things. But I think that, like you said, and like we've been talking about, when we come down from the mountain of creativity and we come down to what are the basic things right now, and that could be, the nourishment of water, getting clean water, and that could be a symbol for clean relationships or clean listening. Am I listening from a space that is going to be helpful for all parties, or am I just trying to make my opinion known, or am I trying to feel good? There's not a charge there. We should be able to walk away from these conversations and be curious and be like, wow, it's so fascinating that's how you said, and you get to believe that, but that we get to come to harmony and say, well, but we're also human, and there are basic things that we all need to maintain our joyousness.
I'm laughing because there's a poem in my book, and it's
Oh,
called
read it.
On Entropy, and it's very short. It just says, "Harmony returns only to again disperse." And I think that's the nature of things, and we have to accept that balance today is not balance tomorrow necessarily. It might be, but there's ever shifting patterns in the physical, universe, and the nature of reality. Like, there are some laws that govern it, so there are some constants, right, or some things we experience as constants. But we also have perpetual motion, heartbeat, breath. Like, you know discomfort is always going to be real, even if we deny it. And I think
Mm,
that it can be like a relief just to accept that and be like, oh, I'm fine being uncomfortable sometimes. I remind myself occasionally that, like, George Washington had none of his teeth. Like, literally, this guy is crossing frigid Delaware River, on Christmas with no teeth. Like, he probably didn't feel good. Like, literally existing probably hurt a little bit.
what?
And that was just true for people throughout history until, like, really recently, you know, that we were probably forced to be okay with discomfort because as we aged, that was just uncomfortable. There was no really
Well,
way to make it that much more comfortable.
and a big challenge, because we're now getting to the point where a lot of those challenges will never be seen in generations going forward. So then how do we maintain that uncomfortable progress, that ability? And I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like I always come back to the surfing ideology, because the waves will always be there. They change. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are more fun, some are more challenging. Some can just wipe you out.
Yeah.
But I'm going into the wave. I'm not just going to stand on the shore and watch the waves go by. Are you going to jump into some of these waves? And even if you're just starting, maybe you want to change your life, and it doesn't have to be drastic. Just do the small things, especially now, right?
I think everyone uses the word resilient like a buzzword because we all want to be resilient. But what does it mean to become resilient or to find resilience or to, like, you know, that involves exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Gotta jump off to bounce back.
There have been so many times where I get to the water, I'm so excited, and I get my wetsuit on and everything, and then I get out of my car and I'm like, oh, it's cold. Oh, it's real cold. I'm gonna go in there. Okay. And so you're like, you gotta like pump yourself up to go in. And I think and not that we all need to pump ourselves up just to do life, but that there's a little bit of giddiness that happens. Sometimes I'll find myself like, woo, like, it's a famous thing when you get on a board and you finally ride a wave and you scream, you're like, oh, I did it. I actually was able to. And that's my encouragement for everyone watching. And that's what I try and encourage myself and those that I'm around to do, is find the edge and work the edge. Find where you're uncomfortable. You don't have to go so far, and just work within that space for a little bit. Every now and then take a risk in a direction that you feel like there's more probability, instead of it being like take a risk on something you really know. But that's what we're talking about, knowing yourself, so that way you can know, oh, that's not really a direction that I need to be putting my energy into.
I think the more times you do that, that you take the risk, that you jump in the water, when it's really cold, the more you become okay with being cold, or you accept it as a state, you know, it's no longer something that you suffer through, but rather just experience as the
Correct.
reality it is.
Yeah.
And then being cold doesn't bother you because it's a state that you just recognize and accept and, you know, allow, right? I'm not saying to,
Well, you're integrating, right? You
right?
integrate it into your being. Yeah.
It's
It's
okay.
like I always say it's like go ahead.
It's okay to be cold, okay to be sad, okay to be anxious. Like it's okay to be all these things because they won't
Mm,
stay. They're impermanent.
permission. Thank you, Rachel. Permission to just be. Yeah. And by the way, just because I think it's amazing and you got your first book out, Rachel has her new poetry book, Meditations on Being. Yeah, beautiful cover.
Thank you.
Awesome. You can
Thank
get
you.
it on Amazon, Valium Publishing. Is that what it is?
Deep Vellum Publishing.
Deep
And
Vellum Publishing.
you can find them on deepvellum.org, and you can also find this book on Amazon, which it's just for those of us who are not in the Dallas area, it's probably the easiest way to come by it. And I appreciate anyone's support who wishes to engage with the book. And actually, one more level, Darren, talking about intention and space. The woman who designed this cover, her name's Kelsey Heimerman. She's also a local artist. She was the artist in residence at my meditation studio before we closed. And so
Oh,
she
wow.
would trade me art, always in the studio, rotating as she would create for, you know, her attendance. And in my space, this painting, the only one you can see back on the wall, is a work of hers that I just recently acquired. So it's like
Oh,
weaving
beautiful.
meaningful things. It just
Oh,
brings richness. And that's I think, the joy that being intentional, paying attention, doing all this work that we're talking about, right? Living life in kind of in a way that makes you happy. You have to figure that out, you know?
if you're weaving your rug of life, what are you gonna, weave it with? It's
I would
beautiful.
rather create something like this with my friends, you know, than anything else. So I'd rather
Do
do this
it.
with you than anything else.
Oh, I would do this again and again, and I'm sure we will, because yeah, this is a time for creating. This is a time to ride the changes and the waves in your life that are positive, and know that they are there. Know that if you're looking for help, there is someone that can help. If you're looking to be more quote unquote resilient, the experiences in your life will show up to help make you more resilient. And may you do it smoothly, gracefully, and with joy and uh, more centeredness in your life. Yeah.
Hopefully, making
Thank you.
progress all the time.
That's right. Do it. Do it now. Thank you, Rachel. It's just always such a pleasure to have you on. We'll do this again soon. I know we will. Once again, Rachel's book, Meditations on Being, we'll post it in the comments afterwards too, so that way you can just click and purchase. Also, because Rachel's a poet, it's all these books I know will just be great to just get a reading from. So if you're lacking inspiration, you could grab Rachel's book and just open it to a page. Yeah, and if you're looking for some of those poems, she has on her Facebook page as well. I know you've been posting those, and those are super inspirational. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Cool.
much.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time on Living a Better Life talk show. Have a great day. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.